Today I wanted to dive into some world building. Before I do, if you are in the Technopunk Discord and want to pursue that campaign again in the future potentially, look for this symbol up in the top corner. It will tell you when there are spoilers and when to skip to avoid them. Now, this is a new world idea spawned from one simple concept. What if you like the open-ended opportunities of high magic, but you don't love using magic in your settings? We'll be building this world without D&D in mind, but in a future video I might show you how these ideas can be ported into D&D. Without further ado, the old gods are dead, and technology is on the rise, so grab your gears and wind your springs. Welcome to Nytherra. I won't talk too much about the core tenets of world building, but I will mention one of them here. You need to have a core concept to build your world around. In Nytherra, that core concept is to have the versatility of high magic without actual high magic. Now, I'm a great fan of eldritch horror and the fantasy that comes with that, the magics and the incomprehensible nature of what is included in that genre. But not everyone is, and the friend who I had built this world with definitely was not. So we decided to marry a few world concepts together. One of those was our eldritch high fantasy, and one of those was our steampunk low magic but high technology setting. And we decided to marry them together by killing the gods. Now, let's lay out some history. Archibald, can you take care of that for us?
Have our young friends returned? Well, gather round to hear the stories of the gods. Not those whose myths you've heard before, but those who were lost to time. Now, how may a god be lost to time, you might ask? In much the same way as you or I. They've all died. Or rather were killed. You see, there was no remorse in the eyes of that fell being who drew his blade through the hearts of the beings that humanity revered. No one knows what became of that fool, although legend does tell of the blade that was used. A dagger made of fine golden steel, a ruby set in the pommel. Primordium. Now, why would this human have decided to slay these beings of incomprehensible power? Well, you see, it is because of the first sentinel. The first sentinel received visions of a future in which the gods turned on humanity and destroyed us all. And he also received visions of a future without them, a future which was only achievable through technological growth. And so he created Primordium, the unholy marriage of the power of those eldritch entities once known as magic, and this new power known as technology. He gave this power to a man who is now known only as the One Who Kills Gods. The One Who Kills Gods was an extremist, and while he is now lost to time, time has marched onwards until the gods were killed. These two, the first sentinel and the One Who Kills Gods, set Arkneuron on its path to become what it is today.
Thank you, Archibald.
Is that as far as you wanted me to go?
Yeah, I'll send him back your way in a little bit.
Oh, well, alright then.
Sorry, he has a tendency to ramble on and on a bit. Anyhow, now Nytherra has a founding myth. There were old gods, and there are no longer any old gods. We also have a few characters primed and ready to start religions about. We have the first sentinel, and we have the One Who Kills Gods. We're off to a really good start. We even have some potential conflicts to explore. Now, before we get more into the modern day, let's talk a little bit more about the first sentinel and get that base down.
Oh, the first sentinel? I think my expertise could be of good service here, my good man.
Archibald, it's been like 15 seconds. Is this your channel or mine?
Well, it seems you just don't appreciate a good historian.
Goodness. Anyways, where was I? Oh, right, the first sentinel. The first sentinel was immortal, just the same as you or I am, at least as far as you know I am. He felt the gods didn't help the mortals as much as they should, so he set out to help them himself. Through various magical and non-magical means, he created technology. With this technology, he was able to help relieve the burdens that were put on the mortals. His progression was then twisted, as all inventions are, to killing. He created a knife and amplified it through the magics of the very gods that he had rejected. This knife, Primordium, was then taken by the One Who Kills Gods to, surprise, kill gods. Now, this is what is known to our characters in the modern day. However, there's more to the story that they don't know. The One Who Kills Gods didn't just kill the gods out of spite, or because he hated them, although he did hate them. The gods actually attacked first. They felt that the technology was a threat. If the mortals could solve their own problems, then what reason did they have to worship the gods? So they attacked to destroy the technology, and the One Who Kills Gods was sent to enact retribution, to kill them before they could kill the mortals. After the One Who Kills Gods had killed the gods, there was a power vacuum created of literally cosmic proportions. The first sentinel was the first person to step in and try and fill this void. He began to create beings, not of flesh and blood, but of metal and oil. These primitive automatons were simple and could only do simple tasks, and while they were very reliable, they were almost ineffective in a world of complex and changing circumstances. They couldn't learn and they couldn't adapt to new situations. And so the first sentinel began to seek out more powerful forms of automation. He turned to some very macabre forms of technology, and he took from the ranks of the dead of men and integrated their minds and their hearts into these automatons, creating the first witnesses.
Friends, you have returned. Come and sit down, and I shall relate unto you another tale. I have told you previously of the founding of Nuren, but I wish now to tell you of one of the few vestiges from its founding days. In the very early days of the reign of the first sentinel, he created many constructs with some semblance of intelligence. However, they could only create the most simple tasks. However, he wanted to go further, and so he found greater technology, which has since been lost, to create automatons of genuine intelligence. And so he created what are called the Witnesses.
Yeah, Archibald, that's what I just told them. Weren't you listening?
I thought that we agreed that I could tell them about this.
Well, you've remembered wrong. If you want, though, you could maybe tell them about how this affects the modern day.
Ha! That is the best part, anyways. My dear friends, there was one of the Witnesses, which is now known simply as the Chronicler. It walked among this fledgling nation. Although it was not known as Nuren then, it was known by a very different name. It was known as Brasshaven. Brasshaven was a safe space from the chaos of the fallen gods. The chronicler walked among it and recorded how it learned and how it grew within this new and changing time. Brasshaven was patrolled by sentient constructs known as Iron Hands, which policed those who lived within. It was fed by constructs in the fields. It was protected by constructs of war. And yet, Brasshaven would not survive the coming days, for there came a tempest which rose up and fell upon Brasshaven and destroyed it completely. It left it in ruins and in shambles, to eventually be rebuilt as Nuren. Now the only witness that survived the devastation was the Chronicler, and he chronicled all of it. It is rumored that he is still around Nuren, and there are many historians who claim to have talked with him. However, none of these have been corroborated, and can therefore not be trusted in the historical context.
Thank you, Archibald. Dramatic as always.
Of course. Perhaps I could tell them of the elder algorithms now.
No, Archibald, those aren't going to come in for a little while longer. And I called telling them about that anyways.
Oh, bah, humbug. Do as you will.
Thank you. Now, these artificial entities were extremely prevalent in early Brasshaven. The Wardens protected from outside threats, the Iron Hands from inside crime, and of course, the Witnesses protected information. They were commanded that even through calamities, they must protect what future generations would need to proceed, both in terms of technology and history. Now, a critical piece of information that the Witnesses were protecting is that the old gods were dead, and a new god was rising, that of belief. People had long worshipped these eldritch entities that they referred to as gods, and they needed a new place to put their faith. They began to pray to the first sentinel, and viewed him as a god. They also revered the one who kills gods, but for very different reasons. He became a bringer of death and destruction, while the first sentinel was a harbinger of life and technology. The sentient constructs that he had created became his angels, and people referred to them as heavenly beings, and thus Sentinelism was born. As mortality drew to a close for the first sentinel, he began to seek out ways to extend his life. He began to augment his body with technology, and made himself into one of his own sentient constructs. He began to become paranoid, and he believed that people would try to assassinate him as he had assassinated the old gods. He created an honor guard for himself of highly specialized sentient constructs, and his paranoia of death went much further. Everything had to be tested before he would touch it, because he was so convinced that somebody was going to try and kill him. Eventually, fragments of the old gods began to appear at the corners of his vision, shadows of the former selves of those eldritch entities that he had ordered killed, and he began to go mad. His mind slowly unraveled, trying to comprehend the magnitude of his sin. In this madness, he tried to resurrect those old gods. In forge and flame, he crafted prosthetic bodies. In steel and gold, he encased their minds and their hearts. And in the throes of insanity, from their bodies, he raised the greatest of sentient constructs, the Elder Algorithms. Elder Algorithms, by virtue of the donors of their brains, are incredibly smart and unstable artificial intelligences, with bodies of living, twisting, screeching metal, and minds of incomprehensible strength. They're almost as destructive as their original forms were. However, in the centuries between their death and their reanimation, their brains began to decay, and they find it much harder to act directly now. Their thoughts move in a haze erratically. As the first sentinel worked to create an elder algorithm from the final, most powerful of the eldritch gods, he released the ire of that god in the form of a primal tempest, which acted not of its own accord, but of the remnants of the anger of the god for Brasshaven and for the first sentinel. The storm raced down to destroy Brasshaven and the sentient constructs therein, and then returned to try and destroy the first sentinel himself. However, he hid himself within the corpse of the dead god, and worked feverishly with a manic focus to create the body for this eldritch god. From the old corpse rose a new, metallic body, which drew the storm of its wrath back into itself, and then disappeared. The first sentinel stumbled back to his palace, his mind completely shattered, and he stood looking out over the ruins of Brasshaven. He entered a catatonic state, his mind still and his metallic body stiff, and he remains there until this day, a statue in the rebuilt Arknuren. Some people began to worship these algorithms. Others continued to worship the first sentinel, his body an apparent statue in the center of the city. Others still left worship behind entirely, and while superstition still exists in all cultures and societies, they believed that having no god was preferable to having the volatile nature of the gods that they had worshipped thus far. Many people will still climb Sentinel Mount, however, in the hopes that they will be blessed with information and technology as the first Sentinel was. Now that we know some of the history of the religions of the world, which is actually the history of the world itself, let's make some physical world building happen. I love the idea of indelible marks left by eldritch entities. In fact, we said low magic, but not no magic, so let's make it happen. Maybe the blood of the gods kind of collected into a basin. Perhaps that basin was already partially full of water. Perhaps that basin was actually an entire sea. And perhaps because of the blood that seeped into it, that sea is now extremely saturated with aether, the stuff of the old gods' magic. Now, we can just combine some concepts to create a name for this. Let's call it the Aether Brine Sea. Brine is water that is extremely saturated with salt, and aether is, as I've just mentioned, the stuff of the old gods' magic. So we'll call it highly saturated with aether brine. With the Aether Brine Sea, it'll be a very powerful magic that is not understood and not easily used. We'll leave it very vague in how it works to both the characters and the audience. Even if we want to define it for ourselves, having that vague magic system will help it to feel more mysterious and make magic feel more impactful in the story when it does come up. So how about another physical space? Another concerning mystery for our characters to explore. What if we created a sea where no life could exist? It was completely silent, devoid of anything living. We could call it the Sea of the Silent Tongues, and within it, nothing can live, not even those creatures that would be introduced later on by mortals. I think this could be a really interesting plot point to explore, and so I think I want both oceans to be part of this world. Let's put Arknuren kind of somewhere in between the two. Close enough to both of them that they can both impact the story, but not so close that either one becomes the focus of the story. Most cities in real-world history were built on some kind of water, whether that was the banks of a river, the shores of a lake, or the beaches of an ocean. And we'll keep that the same here. Let's create a river for Arknuren to be on, and we'll call it the Sunderflow. To build this into the world more, it was created by the tempest that rose from the final Eldritch God's body. And as it came down to destroy Brasshaven, it carved deep channels in the earth, tunnels that went very deep that haven't been explored. Think kind of similar to the Mammoth Caves in eastern United States. With these tunnels, then filled with water, and this water rose from Sentinel Mount to the north all the way down towards the Sea of Silent Tongues to the south. Perhaps we could make it even more interesting than just being a flow caused by the sundering of the surface of Nytherra, and say that one of the elder algorithms has taken up residence inside. Our characters could discover this later on, or it could be something that subtly manipulates the story right up until the end. Now, I might make a future video to explain the other cities that are on this map later, but for now, it should give you a vague understanding of the lay of the land. Note that there is more land to the south, east, and some to the north and west, but there is a much larger, uncontaminated ocean to the northwest. Beyond that ocean, and perhaps even scattered across the unseen portions of the continent, there are other nations. They won't be the focus of any stories I would tell in this world, but they could play a role. With that, I really hope that you've enjoyed learning about Arknuren and Nytherra, their world that I created with my friend James, and credit goes to him for his amazing ideas and for inspiring this world. Couldn't have done it without him, if for no other reason than that this idea is not one that would have come to my mindscape at all otherwise. He's one of the best friends that I've made along my journey, and he's an incredible creative mind. I may revisit this world in future videos with the ways that the gods interact with the current worldscape, with how the technology progresses, and with how plotlines might unfold in this world, but those will have to be separate videos. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me here. And remember, maybe the real technology is the friends that we made along the way. Have a great night.